it's now time for our talk this evening. It's a great privilege to introduce our speaker for the night.
Ryan Murphy is an assistant professor of sociology at Chestnut Hill College, where he has served since 2005. Ryan holds a PhD in sociology from Temple University and bachelor's and master's degree from St. Joseph University. Ryan's research interests are religions, I should know that, right. Women, religious, social stratification, gender and sexuality, and social determinants of health. You know, I'm not a spelling bee person, okay? Stick with me. At Chestnut Hill College, Ryan teaches sociology courses that focus on structural inequality. Ryan is married to his partner, Krista Murphy, who also serves at Chestnut Hill College as God bless you. Who also serves at Chestnut Hill College as Vice President for Strategic Innovation. Both Krista and Ryan are proud parents to a son, Liam. He's one of our Kahoot winners of tonight as well, and a Norwood Fontbonne Academy student. So let's get a round of applause for Dr. Ryan Murphy.
So thank you all for the invitation to speak here tonight, and to all of you for being here, for your presence. I hope that what I share this evening is meaningful to you in any way that makes sense for where you are on your journey through life. At the very least, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about my own experience in trying to make sense of what at the time seemed like an impossible situation. For those of you who I've had in sociology classes, you know that I have a tendency to be very reflective, especially in some of the assignments that I ask my students to complete. A lot of reflective essays. But it's also how I teach, or how I try to teach. I often try to bring in my own life experiences in ways that I hope don't come across as self-indulgent, but rather are instructive and illustrative. I try to make connections to our shared human condition to bring sometimes abstract sociological concepts to life. A phrase that I say all the time in class, and that I've given the title of this talk, is that nothing happens in a vacuum. In other words, we're all affected by the social world around us. And while we may try to compartmentalize different parts of our lives, at the end of the day, each of those parts is affecting us in every moment. It shapes our outlook, our mood, our hopes, our expectations, our fears, and choices that we make and how we respond to the consequences of those choices, good, bad, and everything in between. So in that spirit, I'm going to talk tonight about one of the most challenging times in my own life, about 8 years ago when my mom was dying from cancer. I imagine that everyone in this room tonight has been touched by that disease in some way. Perhaps you're a survivor, know someone who is, or maybe you too have lost someone who's been special to you to cancer. And I think we have to acknowledge that this is often a very personal experience, and it can often be upsetting. Though I hope what I talk about isn't too heavy, I do truly appreciate the invitation to be vulnerable here tonight, to share more of my own humanity in a space of caring people, as I shake off the Dr. Murphy sociology professor role and instead focus more on Ryan, the son, the husband, the brother, and the dad. So I think it's easy to see God at work in our lives in the good times. However, it's often harder to recognize where God is present in times of grief, in times of sadness, and in loss. So in 1998, I was 18 years old, so you could do the math, 44. I moved away from Toms River, New Jersey, where I grew up, and moved into St. Joseph's University as a freshman. I'd always had a relationship with some sort of higher power, God, divine, whatever you might call it, but it was really my education, my Jesuit education at St. Joe's, and of course the Jesuits are deeply connected to the Sisters of St. Joseph, and it was that education that was transformative for me in helping me to understand my own faith and how I have come to know God in my life. So since coming to Chestnut Hill in 2005, I've developed this further, a constant unfolding of how I understand my experience with a higher power. It's a work in progress for sure, because we all are, but one that's been spiritually nourishing and fortifying, especially in those difficult times. One of the gifts that St. Ignatius of Loyola, the founder of the Jesuits, gave to his followers, and one of the key tenets of what we now call Ignatian spirituality, is the idea of finding God in all things. Again, I think it's real easy to see God's presence in joyful times, much harder to find God through our tears, in situations that we deem unfair, in people we never seem to understand or who refuse to understand us. Yet St. Ignatius taught his followers that God is present in every moment. And it's true. In the last few months of 2015, especially in the first few weeks in November, they were profoundly sad for me and my family. But God was present in every moment. In every phone call, every email, every text message, every visit, my family and I were deeply touched by the care that our friends and loved ones showed us through a very difficult time. God was present in their words and in their actions. So thinking back to my mother's last few days especially, I witnessed God's love and compassion in ways that are kind of hard to capture in words. For more than 40 years, my mom worked in a hospital setting. She was an x-ray tech for most of her life. She never went to college. She graduated high school and went to x-ray school and worked her way up through that medical realm over the course of her career, moving through various positions in radiology and management during her career. But it was really always patient care that she focused most on, that she loved the most. And though she would occasionally get frustrated having to navigate the politics or the bureaucracy of hospital administration, my mom was always able to ground herself through interactions with patients and their families. She recognized the humanity and dignity in all people, especially in their most vulnerable times of illness. My mother brought God's compassionate touch to her patients whom she served, and I like to think, too, that she would bring those lessons home to us, to my brother, my sister, and I, to teach that to us at home as well, teaching us to hopefully always put the needs of others before our own. So in the last week of my mom's life, 3 of her longtime friends, all nurses, Lonnie, Annette, and Kathy, each took turns staying at my parents' home around the clock, caring for my mother's every need when she was unable to do those most intimate and personal things for herself anymore. Likewise, my parents' neighbors, Kim and Lucia, made sure that we had plenty of bagels and boxes of Joe on the counter by 6:30 every morning to provide countless other, and also provided countless other meals, helping to nourish us through those very, very long days. God's healing presence definitely worked through their hands. In her last 3 days in particular, my mom transitioned into palliative care, so hospice, right? That gentle, compassionate manner in which hospice caregivers tend to their patients is really nothing short of God's work. Similarly, those nurses spent time caring for us as well. Okay, Maura? Taking time to speak with my dad, my sister, brother, and I to talk about my mom's transition from this life into the next. Tellingly, the nurses all had tears, and this one nurse in particular had tears in her eyes when she spoke to us about how faith would really sustain us through these difficult days and into the future when my mom might not be physically present to us anymore. This woman showed her own vulnerability to us and shared in our grief as we tried to make sense out of an incomprehensible situation. She even suggested a psalm for us to pray with, Psalm 139. A few minutes later, Krista, my wife, came into the room and tearfully explained that this was the psalm that her spiritual director suggested that she pray with when Krista and I were struggling with infertility and desperately wanted to be parents, and that proved far more elusive than we had anticipated. God was indeed present in that moment. And in writing this reflection about my mom's life, I found God most present in thinking about her last days on earth. Each of us spent countless minutes sitting with Mom in her bedroom during the last weeks of her life, holding her hand, stroking her hair, companioning her in this transition. As her disease progressed, my mom, of course, became extraordinarily weak in her last few days and relied on many of us to take care of those basic needs. As heartbreaking and difficult as it was to see my mom in such a diminished state, there really was a quiet beauty in seeing a life cycle complete. My mother, who gave birth to me, to my sister, to my brother, who cared for so many patients during her own lifetime, now needed us to do the same for her. We took turns helping her to eat and making sure that she was comfortable. And this truly was a gift, that God gave each of us the grace to companion my mom in her time of greatest need, as she began to end her mortal life and prepare for her eternal one. It's difficult to understand. It's hard to make sense of why God took her so early. She was only 63. She never smoked. She rarely drank. And when she did, it was a glass of wine with a whole lot of ice, like once every other week. Wasn't a lot. And she took reasonably good care of herself. She did everything seemingly right. It just wasn't fair. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. My mom needed more time with us, with Liam, with her granddaughter, and yet now she was gone. It certainly didn't make sense. But yet there was still so much for us to celebrate and to smile about, and of course be thankful for. So one night during her last week, my son Liam, who's sitting here, who won trivia a little while ago, Liam was 2 years old when my mom was passing away. And he came upstairs to see Nona, who was sleeping. And he came into her room and said hello to everyone sitting with her, because the room was crowded. And he grabbed the ball that he was playing with and headed back down the hallway saying, "Come on, Nona. Wake up, Nona. We're going to go play." God was most certainly present to all of us during that moment, because everyone was crying, as you might imagine. But Liam brought the Paschal mystery, the idea that there can be joy through sadness, to life for all of us. How as human beings we can be so saddened in our own suffering, in sickness and death, by poverty, by the countless injustices in our world, that we live Good Friday and its pain, yet simultaneously remain hopeful for something better, for new life on Easter Sunday. In seeing Liam and my niece Cora smile and laugh in their innocence, and they were far too young to comprehend what was happening, I saw this hope in new life after my mom's passing. So as they grow, each of us takes pride in teaching them lessons that my mom taught to us, to live lives of service and integrity, and to be witness of God's presence in all things. We undeniably grieved her loss. But I know my mom lived a life with expansive capacity to love, reflective of the love that God has for all people. She wasn't perfect, and none of us is. And I don't think we need perfection. We just need to recognize that we're all unfinished. We're constantly being formed and always have opportunities to adjust and to try to be better versions of ourselves. Our God doesn't give up on us, and maybe we shouldn't give up on ourselves quite so easily either. From losing her at such a young age, I tried to channel looking for those special moments of grace into how I live my life in general. Again, it's really easy to see God when things are going well, but it's much harder to parse out God's presence when everything seems to be going wrong. I try to keep that in mind in my teaching and how I interact with my students, with my colleagues, and with my friends, and of course my family. As my mom was actively dying, and I was transforming how I talked about her illness from someone living with cancer to someone who was dying from that illness, I was still teaching and working. I was here. I did the best I could to keep my own personal struggles separate from how I was in the classroom, but I also know that that was impossible. I know that I was not necessarily being the best version of myself as a teacher, because frankly, that role had to take a back seat, because I was struggling with losing someone who I was so close to, a person who literally brought me into this world. I took dozens of walks and prayer around campus, around the labyrinth, and tried to keep an undisturbed face. But then I realized that that wasn't helpful, nor was it real. In sharing what I was going through with people here, with my students, with my work friends especially, I saw God's grace in their kindness, in emails and checking in with me after class, in their offers to remember me in their own private prayer. Living through something so difficult and being transparent about my own sadness and grief, allowing myself to be vulnerable and trust that that vulnerability would be supported, was transformative in my teaching and in my life. It reminded me that while we may interact for 75 minutes a week, or less if you skip my class, we're all carrying something. Sometimes that burden is light, and other times it might be heavy. But each of us has a deeper story that shapes us every day. The whole idea of nothing happens in a vacuum, that's not just for sociology content. It's also about how I try to live my life as a teacher here at Chestnut Hill. To remind myself not to take things so personally, or to jump to conclusions when someone is short with me or rubs me the wrong way. To be the most authentic teacher that I can be, I need to acknowledge my own humanity. That I'm also a son, a father, a brother, and a husband. And those experiences are real. They shape how I am in the classroom and hopefully how I am in the hallway when I pass you. For me, it helps to establish trust and to build relationships. These are so critical to who we are at this college. Each person's story is far more complex than I might be able to understand. Every student, every colleague, everyone who I pass in these halls. And I try to remind myself that God is indeed working in and through them as well. I might just need to take some time to reflect and find where that moment is.